Greetings! I'm Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm going to build this Humber armoured car from Warlord Games. This is a 28mm scale, or if you prefer, 56th scale plastic kit that can be used to build either the Mk2 or Mk.4 Humber. I chose the Mk.4 mostly because why not? On the back of the box we see a couple of built and painted examples, a list of paint colours, though they are just base coat colours. You'll probably need a few more paints than that. There's also some information about the vehicle, and an image depicting the extras you get in the box. Inside the box, we find two sprues neatly moulded in grey plastic. The moulds are pretty neat, though there are mould lines and, while most of them are quite minor, there are also some that stand out quite a bit, particularly on rounded parts, like the axles and the pew-pew barrel. It's not a big deal to neaten those up though, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. This is a gaming kit, so obviously it's not going to be hyper detailed, and some of the parts are going to be a little bit chunky, so they survive the regular handling inherent to wargaming. Still, the detailing is pretty good. I'm obviously not a Humber expert, so I've got no idea if there's any glaring inaccuracies, but it looks like a Humber and can easily be identified as such on the gaming table, which is the main thing. The one problem I have with the plastic in this kit is that there are no part numbers on the sprues. To be fair, it is a pretty minor inconvenience, but it is an inconvenience. I've no idea what the reasoning for that is, and I'm pretty sure this is a common thing with SK tooling. It would be nice if they'd put numbers, just saying. Let's move on. We get a decal sheet with a small variety of markings on it, which is pretty simple. The marking guide in the instructions will probably help you figure out where these go. There's a stat card, which is a card that has stats printed on it. Good for those forgetful folks like myself, or those who simply don't want to have to reference a book to see what the model can do. You also get a little damage marker kit. I've always thought these were a pretty cool inclusion, even if I don't use them. It seems like you also get an order dice now. It has been a while since I bought a Warlord kit, and this seems to be something new, and hopefully it's not just specific to this one kit. And here's the instructions. This is a nice little booklet. It's not too big and not too small. There's a couple of sprue diagrams, which you will need, because as mentioned, the sprues don't have any numbers on them for whatever reason. The diagrams are clear and easy to understand and follow. There isn't anything especially complicated in this build, but you should still certainly pay attention. I quite like toward the end of the instructions that there are little colour images of the bits of detail that you're adding. That's pretty helpful, and it would have been nice to see that all the way through the build. The painting guides are the same way, and obviously the paints listed are just the base colours, but the pictures are pretty good and could be very helpful. Okay, let's glue some bits of plastic together. I begin with the turret, because the instructions say to. I glue the front part on first, which comes with some convenient supports, which should help you get everything lined up nice and neat. I've chosen to build the Humber Mk.4, so I skip on past the Mk2 instructions to step F. Obviously, if you wanted to build the Mk2, you wouldn't do that. I'm sure the assembly is very similar, just the parts are a bit different. I'm probably waffling a bit too much here, so, as you can see, I've added the other 3 turret sides. The parts are shaped such that it's pretty hard to make a mistake, though there is a little bit more gappiness at some of the corners than I really wanted, but it's nothing a bit of putty can't fix later on. The roof comes next, and it pretty much drops right into place. Now it's time to do a bit of work on the whole top. I glue this doodad into place. This part is absent for the Mk2. The kit is obviously designed so you can't swap the turrets, so you do have to choose between either the Mk2 or the Mk.4, or put in a bunch of extra work to have either magnetised or otherwise swappable turrets. It could be worse, I suppose. Let's go back to working on the turret, because the instructions say to. If we don't, they'll get mad. I install the hatches, and having them folded up in the open position is certainly a possibility, but I'm modelling mine closed. I then add the mantlet. There is a bit of flexibility for the elevation you can model here, so position the part how you like it. Next to it, I add the smoke launchers. I'm pretty sure that's what those doodads are anyway. To the right of that, I add a nice little searchlight on a nice little bracket. And then, even further to the right, on the side of the turret, I add this doodad. I've no idea what it is. Back around the other side, into the mantlet part, I attach the MG. As long as you don't do something like putting it in backwards or upside down, it should be fine. I then install this high-speed metal distribution tube. There's no keying to worry about, though you may need to do some nudging to make sure that it's on nice and straight. I then add a couple of antennas, neither of which are especially difficult to put into place, though, again, you might have to do a bit of nudging. In retrospect, it might be worth leaving these off until later, because of how the kit goes together. The turret gets attached to the hull, and antennas like these are easy to break off, even with simple, gentle handling. Obviously I have glued them on, so it's not that big a deal. Just something you might want to think about. Speaking of hull, it's time to work on that. Before going too far, I drill a hole into both hull side parts. If you've been around my channel for a while, you'll probably be surprised that I didn't miss this instruction. Once the holes are drilled and cleaned up, I turn my attention to the hull top part, where I glue this plate thing on. This could of course have been done when I added the round thing, but the instructions say to do it now, and I would never disobey the instructions. Then I glue the left hull side into place. The instructions wanted the turret installed before this. I guess I'm not so instruction following after all.
Oh, what a rebel!
Anyway, I figured the turret would probably get in the way a little bit, but I'm putting it on now anyway. The instructions tell me to, and it probably will be significantly more difficult to do when the hull is all together, so it is best to do it now, unless you're going to magnetize and such. This is just a simple matter of carefully gluing the plug, for lack of better words, into the bottom of the turret while it's installed on the hull top. If you're careful with the glue and don't bond the turret into place, it should still rotate. You could just leave the turret sitting loose, or kajigga some magnetization, which I don't think would be that difficult. I didn't really feel like it though, so I didn't. I then add the other hull side part, which goes on just as easily as the other one. You may have to apply some pressure, but I don't think that's a big deal. The lower front plate goes on next, and unsurprisingly, it goes on nice and easy. Though again, you might like to apply some gap nullifying pressure, and you may also need to do a tiny bit of putty work if the gaps are too gappy for you. I follow that with the rear plate, which goes on the rear.
Gee, thanks, Captain Obvious!
Then I close up the hull with the frame part, which includes some suspension bits and some simple underbody detail. Hopefully I've not missed any further drilling instructions on the inside of the hull. Into the holes I previously drilled, I add the headlamps. They go into place quite easily. The right one has a little cover. Owing to the way they're shaped, it should be pretty difficult to put the wrong lamp on the wrong side. The axle parts come next, and these more or less drop right into place. The parts did have a fair bit of flash, but I didn't bother doing a lot of cleanup work on them. They won't be all that visible anyway, so I wasn't too concerned. Doing it this way I saved several seconds of time. I follow that with the vision port for the driver. If you haven't glued the turret into place, you can easily rotate it out of the way. Then I install the suspension doovers. They're not too difficult to place, though I was a little bit confused by the initial instruction, but the next diagram shows more clearly how the lower part of the shock absorber makes contact with the axle. It's easy enough, despite my initial bamboozlement. Next, mudguards. Unless you've done it very wrong, you should be able to position these over the shock absorbers quite easily. I like to add a bit of extra glue on the inside, so the glue god will smile upon me. Rear mudguards go on in the same way, except you don't have to worry about any shock absorbers. Let's go back to the front of the hull, where I install this spare wheel. There's nothing to guide this, you've just got to eyeball the position. Or, if you prefer, you could just leave it off. I then add the non-spare wheels, and these go onto the obvious axle-y bits. The fit is good, though there is enough play here that you may need to do a bit of nudging so the wheels sit nice and straight. The rear view mirrors go on next. There's one of these for either side, and they're pretty simple to install, though again, a bit of nudging might be needed.
This hobby sure involves a lot of nudging, huh?
It sure does, but now it's stowage time. Only the fuel cans needed any assembly, you simply glue the top on. I did manage to lose one of these to the carpet monster, but we'll get to that in a moment. In the meantime, I glue this plate over the engine deck. Be careful not to put it around the wrong way, otherwise there'll be trouble. Then on top of that, I add this stowage box, which is, presumably, for tea. British vehicles have to carry a lot of tea, you see. Let's install the fuel flimsies. You can see this one has a little tab, and that goes into the recess on the rear mudguard. The one I lost is one of those with the tab. It's not a big deal though, you can just eyeball its position without the tab. Something you may have noticed about these is that pretty much all of the flimsies have a sink mark on either side. You can either fix that with some putty, or explain it away as battle damage. Next, I install the stowage boxes on the hull sides. These are probably also for tea, or maybe tins of spotted dick. The top of the box should sit slightly above the top of the mudguards. There are still more flimsies to add, and the instructions show 2 of them on the front right mudguard. You do have to eyeball them, but it's not exactly difficult. I then add 2 larger boxes to the top of the rear mudguards. Shall we make the tea joke again? A smaller box goes on the front left mudguard, which again needs to be eyeballed. This is where the 5th flimsy is supposed to go. I've obviously left that off, because the carpet monster has eaten it. On top of the larger boxes, I add a roll. You've got to eyeball the position of these too. The lack of keying isn't a bad thing here. It means you can put these parts wherever you want them, or if you prefer, you can leave them off without having to do any filling or cleanup. Anyway, that's all. The plastic Humber, in this case Mk.4, in 28mm scale from Warlord Games, is now completed, and I'm pretty happy with how this has turned out. It's a nice little model, and it should play the part on the gaming table quite well. I am a little bit disappointed that you can't, without extra work, build the kit with both turrets. I would imagine most people agree that it is better when you can build and use both turrets when a gaming kit comes with them. Obviously the hull is a bit different between the Mk.1 and 4, but those minor details can be overlooked with a gaming model, really. It's not a huge problem. You could just proxy one mark for the other, unless for some reason you're playing with really tedious people, but it would be nice to be able to use both turrets. Anyway, that's not really all that important, and it's still a rather good kit. It goes together nice and easy, though it did need a bit of cleanup, and you may notice that I've missed a couple of spots, but it's not too much extra work, and it won't be much effort to go back and do the bits I've missed. The detail is rather good. It is obviously a gaming piece, so you should set your expectations accordingly. It's never going to be a super detailed model. Some of the parts are chunkier than is realistic, so they can withstand handling, but if you're buying this kind of kit, you probably already know that. It looks like a Humber, and it should easily be identified as such on the tabletop, and that is its main function. That said, it would still work pretty nicely as a display piece, or in a diorama, if that's what you're into. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the comment section below. If you want to watch me build kits like this one live, I regularly stream my builds here on YouTube and over on Twitch, to which you'll find a link to in the description. Subscribe if you want to see more, and if you like what I do, consider supporting on Patreon or Ko-fi if you're able. Links can be found in the description. Take care of yourselves, be excellent to each other, and thanks for watching. Farewell.